I think gardens can be many things. They can be educational, they can be artistic, they can have a purpose, but for me, it's all about beauty.
That is amazing, that leaf. You cannot help but be inspired by something like that. It's hard to believe, but pretty soon we'll have leaves as big as myself. I mean, most people don't think they're real.
There's just no question. There are some people who are plants people.
It could be called obsessive. There's so many different things you can see if you start looking closer at these plants. You want to share that plant with other people and you want to grow it, and it's like a collector mentality almost.
It's a lot of flowers.
Ready to go? So I'm Tim Jennings and I am one of the gardeners here. I'm a specialty grower with our aquatic collection. We are at Longwood Gardens and we are just on the outskirts of Philadelphia in the beautiful rolling hills of Chester County, Pennsylvania. Beauty is what this garden is all about. We are sitting in our main conservatory overlooking our fern floor. Directly behind you is our main fountain garden. Directly off to the west is our water lily garden. So, you know, a few steps away and you're in a totally different world, all three places. So an aquatic garden is literally anything that can hold water. Never even really knew that there were plants that would grow in water until I came to Longwood Gardens. And my very first rotation here as a student was in our water gardens, and since then I've just been hooked, I guess you could say. And if you walk through, you'll see that there's a series of, I think, 7 ponds that are filled to the brim with tropical plants, hardy plants, all things aquatic out here. And it's amazing what is out here in terms of fragrances and textures and colors. It's just an incredible space to be in. The mystery around aquatic plants is kind of captivating.
We're here at Brooklyn Botanic Gardens right in the city. We're knee-deep in Brooklyn. It's kind of this urban oasis. You wouldn't even know it unless you stepped outside and you could hear the horn honking. We're in a paradise here. Brooklyn Botanic Garden is about 52 acres, so we're a little bit on the small side, but we have 14 outdoor garden spaces. Our Japanese garden is the oldest Japanese garden in North America. Our cherry blossom collection, about 53 cherries, all part of the Prunus genus. They're really kind of our cash cow. People come out to celebrate, for sure, when it's cherry blossom season, and it really is spectacular. Our rose garden is going to be 100 years old in a couple of years, 2028. We have about 6,000 roses in the rose garden. I started in horticulture about 30 years ago, and I have been in love with roses for a very long time and have been kind of a rose nerd. When the position for the Cranford Garden came up, I just knew I couldn't pass it up. I've been following this particular rose garden for 20 years. Every time I had an opportunity to come to New York, I would visit and see its evolution. It is so well renowned. I think we forget about that here for some reason, and I really hope to put it back on the map. For so many rosarians, there are so many plants in that collection that are still very, very rare and not cultivated anymore, and it's a very special place.
Probably the most often asked question is, how deep is the water? So you can see I just jumped into the water. It's about 30 inches deep. And then once we figure out that the water is only 30 inches deep, they start asking why. And they say, well, look at the water. It's black. Why is the water black? They don't know. They think we paint the pools, or, we actually dye the water. And we dye it for 3 reasons. One is to control algae. It helps us control algae by blocking the sunlight. The second thing that it does is it hides the mechanics. Now, what's really fun is to kind of pull something up here. I'll pull this little guy up, because a lot of people don't realize that these things are actually potted in pots. So there's no soil on the bottom here. Every plant's in its own pot. And then the second reason that we actually dye the water is because we don't want you to see this. This is just an ugly crate. It really would distract it. To distract you what you're looking at. So we dye the water mainly to control algae, but we also are hiding mechanics. There are pipes, there's cords, there's lights, and then there are these crates that sit around that hold our plants in the water at various heights. And then the last reason that we dye the water is that it is an amazing backdrop for these plants. It is like having an outdoor studio. This matte black finish actually makes the flowers look like they're jumping out of the water.
What we're looking at is a gorgeous view of the Cranford Rose Garden from the top of the overlook. and we're just a little bit past peak bloom. I think we were at peak maybe Friday of last week, but it is still just really, really glorious, and there's lots of blooms to come. The design of this space was very, very well thought out, and there's a variety of different design elements to consider. Mostly when working with roses, you have to think about bloom time and vantage of when and where the roses will be blooming. The dimensions of the garden are really set up where the roses that bloom more frequently are right in the center, and the roses that bloom one time or less frequently are around the perimeter, but they're also planted with annuals and perennials, so there are other things blooming at that time and also attracting pollinators.
But probably the most iconic of all the things that was done here in the gardens are these giant water platters. So these were also developed back in the early 1960s, and it's developed from two different South American water platters. There's a platter in that pool over there, which we can take a look at real quick. So what we're doing here is looking at this plant. This is one of the parents to the Longwood Hybrid. It is called Victoria Cruziana, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at just the freshness of this thing, and it's only going to get better. These plants are going to be 5 and 6 feet in diameter in another month. I mean, most people don't think they're real. So let's talk about the leaf on Victoria. It is probably the thing that attracts the most attention about these plants. And look, you can see I can push on it, and it doesn't want to sink. It is an amazing structure, and we're going to look at the underside of a leaf here in a minute. But the leaf itself has built in this lip that forms as the plant grows, and this lip actually is kind of flexible, and it moves the leaf around. Unbelievable the way nature has kind of figured out all these things ahead of time for us. And take a close look at the sides of this plant. Look at those thorns. They are as sharp as rose thorns. They are unbelievably vicious. The only part of this plant that is not thorny is the upper surface. Okay? The stalk that leads back, the flower itself, and the underside of this leaf is absolutely covered in thorns. Now take a look at this. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing plant. The infrastructure underneath, the ribs and the little side ribs, enable this plant to hold an amazing, amazing amount of water. So this leaf, believe it or not, it's probably only about maybe a week old. It's unbelievable how fast they're growing. 6 and 7 inches a day sometimes this time of year. It's kind of nice to have a table out here when you're working. It's fun to kind of put things on. You can definitely put things on there. It holds a lot of weight. I mean, this is one of our smaller leaves. This is it's hard to believe, but pretty soon we'll have leaves as big as myself. You can see the tissue is very thin, so these ribs underneath are essential for this plant to hold a lot of weight. As the light kind of shines through this, it's almost like a piece of artwork, isn't it? In the front, if you didn't know any better and came up to this plant, you wouldn't know how vicious this plant was. It's absolutely interesting to feel. If you put your hand out and feel it, it's very leathery and it has an interesting texture. And that's part of the fun out here. Most people can't see things, so you actually have to do kind of a show and tell to them when they come.
When you have a monoculture of all of this roses, if we have something that could wipe them out, we are less at risk of losing everything, having this variety. We have learned from Dutch elm disease, we have learned from our emerald ash borer that planting too many of one species and you get a disease or an insect infestation and you're sort of devastated. This is rose rosette disease or virus, and you can see different forms of or different symptoms on different roses. This is one of the symptoms where you get this kind of deformed cluster of buds. It is caused by a mite. The wind will carry it from a multiflora rose, and it causes this mutation, which is viral. So this is probably covered with thousands of mites that we cannot see. It is devastating. So we're going to take this rose out. It's not going to make it. Once the plant usually has this, it's systemic. And since we can't see the mites, and I don't know if they're there or not, and the wind comes, we're at risk of contaminating all of these other roses. So it's a very, very sad thing, but we can't risk the other plants in the collection.
So last night this flower opened for the first time, and it's getting ready to close back up. What I'm trying to show you here is how interesting the inside of the flower is. So in nature, in South America, these plants are pollinated by beetles. That beetle doesn't live here, so we have to hand pollinate them in order to get seeds. And what I'm doing is just opening it up so you can see the actual entrance that the beetle would actually go into. So here, you can see the hole in the middle of the flower. The beetle literally goes down into that hole. On the bottom side of the flower, you'll see this swollen area. This is the ovary and the stigmatic area, the area where the pollen will be going when the beetle carries it into the flower. So the beetle literally enters this flower. Look at that. Look how crazy that is. But what we're looking at here is the ovary and then the cavity where the beetles will stay overnight to transfer the pollen to the bottom of the flower. So you can see this big cavity down here. The ovary is way at the bottom here, and the beetles literally walk around in the bottom of this flower, getting trapped in it the next morning after coming in the evening. There's some little appendages that look kind of like piano keys. Those are actually food sources for the beetle. They're starchy appendages. So the beetle enters this flower with other beetles. There's probably been 20 or 30 beetles kind of counted or more in a single flower. And the beetles themselves are down in here. They might be mating, they might be doing whatever they're doing in the flower. When the flower closes back up and it reopens again tonight, the beetle literally will push its way back out of that same hole it came through, but this time the anthers, which are shedding pollen, spread pollen on the beetle. So the beetle is covered in pollen, and when he exits the flower, and then he heads back to another one of these first night flowers with pollen on its body, walking around in the bottom of this flower, he actually pollinates the flower. There is fragrances given off by this. They smell like pineapples. So in the evening when you walk out here and they first open, you'll get a very fruity fragrance in the air. That's the fragrance coming from this. And this flower actually heats up. So this is like skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage, it actually heats up. These flowers emit heat. That heat, the fragrance, and the color would attract the beetle to this flower in the first place.
Modern roses were classified in 1867 with the first hybrid tea being hybridized by a man in France named Jouot. A lot of these moderns are very new, and we've got newer hybridizers that are breeding roses for disease resistance and fragrance. For instance, this rose here, this shrub, is a floribunda. Floribunda means many flowers on one cane. So the foliage is really glossy and clean. A lot of roses have black spot or other fungal diseases on the foliage. That's just what comes with roses. We know to accept it, and especially if we're not going to be spraying fungicides, we really know to accept it. But we don't always have to accept it when we can find hybrids that are clean. And as I had mentioned, the modern hybridizers are really doing a great job at making roses a little bit easier. Now, you sacrifice a few things when you hybridize something that is so clean, and it's mostly fragrance. This one to my right is a hybrid rugosa. So another one of those species roses that's been hybridized to meet our purposes of size, which would be low, but also fragrance. So that smells like grandma. I love the way this smells. It has a very powdery, yet there's some clove on that. These have fantastic hips. When we let these develop, these will grow a lot larger, and they will be very, very red and very ornamental. We have to make tough decisions here because we want, this to be beautiful. We want it to be healthy, and sometimes if we plant a rose and it's not going to perform well for us for whatever reason, it doesn't like our soil, it doesn't like our climate, it won't make the party next year. These old garden roses, I want to keep as many of them here as we can because these are our heritage, and these are all worth their weight in gold. I love Pope John Paul II, mostly because it's one of the most fragrant hybrid teas, but it has a lot of black spot and it just isn't doing well. So I think, unfortunately, Pope John Paul won't make the party next year. I don't like to be mean about it, but really you have to earn your keep here. If you're a modern rose, there are so many roses that are being hybridized that will compete with you.
A good question, related to how did the Longwood Hybrid come to be? So back in the 1960s, late 50s, 1960s, when the pools were first built, first of all, these pools were built because we wanted to get Victoria. Okay, that was the initial intent. So when we first started, we were only able to get this plant, Victoria amazonica, the royal water platter, and Victoria cruziana. But once those two plants came together, it just is a natural instinct for gardeners to want to see what happens when you take those two plants and cross-pollinate them. Now Patrick, the person who developed the hybrid, he did the cross both ways, meaning that one way he used Victoria amazonica as the female parent, and one way he used cruziana as the female parent. As luck would have it, only one of those ways germinated for him. And so the hybrid always uses pollen, or the male part of this flower, and it's pollinated to the Santa Cruz water platter on the other side.
This is yellow submarine. The hybridizer is a man named Peng Lim, and everyone is just raving over his roses because, again, you can see that the leaves are so nice and clean. There's not any black spot or disease here. They're very, very beautiful.
Is he a celebrity hybridizer?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, in my view, I'm very starstruck. I love Peng Lim. The hybridizers really look for things like disease resistance. They breed for size of flower. They breed for color. They breed for ever-blooming qualities, if it will bloom throughout the season, but they also breed for fragrance. And it seems like when you hybridize, you only get like 3 out of the 5 characteristics. So if you get something that is clean and glossy like this, most likely it's not going to smell good. If you get something that's clean and glossy like this, it could smell good, but it may not bloom more than once. So there are trade-offs.
So this is one of our production houses that we actually borrow space from them to be able to grow some of the plants that are tropical in this garden. As with all kind of gardening, it all starts with your soil. Okay, the soil is kind of the key component to making sure that everything is healthy. We are very fortunate in this area to have a clay soil, which is ideal for water lilies. And one of the first things we do is screen this soil by just shaking it through a little sieve. So one of the things you'll notice about our soil is that it has a little bit of gravel in it. We intentionally put gravel in our soil so that it doesn't become like a brick. If you ever put soil into a pot and let it dry out, it actually turns into a brick with all the heavy clay content. So we add some gravel, it creates a friable kind of mix for the soil, and it seems to work really well for us. So this is our soil, and then these are the Victoria seeds. So remember, we were talking about Victoria and how the fact that it was grown from seeds every year. This is what those seeds look like. They have a very unique mechanism for dispersing. In the wild, the seeds have to have a way of distributing themselves, because you don't want the plant to set seed and drop all of its seed right in the same place. It's beneficial for the plant to distribute them as far as possible. So each seed is actually coated in a mucus membrane when it first goes, so it floats. And so these seeds literally burst open, float down the currents of the river, get picked up by birds and fish, and are distributed that way, sometimes miles away from the parent plant.
I want to tell you about this special rose. I tell everybody about it. This is Peggy Martin, and when you see a rose or a plant in double quotations, that means it's found, that it wasn't hybridized necessarily, or no one knows, where it came from originally. But Peggy Martin rose is what we call the Hurricane Katrina survivor. During Katrina, a woman named Peggy Martin, who was a great rosarian in New Orleans, lost her home, lost everything. It was very, very devastating, but what was standing was this rose, and it was blooming, and the only thing left was this rose. And people asked her, Peggy, what is this? And she said, I don't know. I don't know. I got this from my grandma. I have no idea what this was. And we recognized it as being something that is tough as nails, a survivor, and something that is worth putting in commerce. And then 20% of the proceeds of every Peggy Martin rose that is sold today goes to hurricane relief. And she is a beast. She is, a good beast. I love this rose. I have one in my garden at home, and you plant a little stick in the spring and it grows 10 to 12 feet in a season. So you do need to have the space for it. But DNA evidence will probably tell us eventually what kind of blood this has. We think it's bourbon. We think it has Witcherana, which are the species and the parentage behind this. But right now it's just Peggy Martin in double quotes. I just want to point out that a lot of celebrities have roses named after them. This is Julie Andrews. It's a great rose. We have Dick Clark in our collection, George Burns, even Phyllis Diller has a rose. We love Julia Child. She is what I call well-behaved because she just sings. She sings most of the year. And I'm going to ask, you know, there is a reason why she's called Julia Child. I think most people guess that it's because of butter. It's a color of butter, and yeah, it's a beautiful rose. Roses fall in and out of fashion. You know, in the 1980s, orange was very, very hot. Single roses that only have, you know, one face of petals have been popular from time to time. And, you know, they kind of fall in and out of favor, just like any other fashion. This is a newer purple. Purple is one that has been called into fashion in the last few years because we know that there's no blue rose and purple roses are hard to grow. But the hybridizer made Ebb Tide and one that's called Twilight Zone. So they're a little bit darker and a little bit more florific than some of the other reds. But you can see all of the petals here, and with proper deadheading, you're going to get more abundant blooms here.
Education is a huge, huge part of what we do here at the garden. We have programs that relate to just about every aspect of gardening, from design courses, they can be workshops. It's amazing that, you know, the different things that are available here in a continuing ed kind of format, as well as our more formalized education of the professional horticulture program. I was actually one of those students. I was in that program back in 1986. And then we have our intern program, so those that are in college seeking education through a college. This is probably one of our fun parts, is we're going up to talk to the public. So when things are on display up there, we go up and do a little bit of a show and tell process with them, where we actually get in the water and cut things and let them smell and feel and see and just have fun with them. So we're going up to do that now.
Is that Longwood? Oh, it's gorgeous. They do it right, don't they? Wow, beautiful. I think that's the new courtyard too. Oh, it's stunning.
Do you recognize any of those plants as well?
Yeah, I know there's a Victoria water lily that comes from Longwood, one of those big water lilies that people want to sit on, and that are the big ones that are kind of prickly and saucer-like. But yeah, fantastic. Oh my gosh, they've done so many great things with that space. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, this has a very English look to it, like the walled garden image. It's really beautiful. When I first started here at the gardens, this was my first job working in our formal rose garden, and it is amazing how roses and water lilies have some similarities. You know, they both have this deep kind of interest in people, you know, whether it's historically, and my grandmother grew that rose plant, and now it brings back memories, or whether you're out here in the water gardens and like, I want to have a water garden. Both of these gardens are phenomenal in attracting people. Some of the roses can have these arching effects which kind of resemble water, you know, they have this waterfalling effect. And one of the things you want to think about when you're doing a water garden is you don't want it just to be a water garden, you want it to be part of the garden, and what better plants to put around it than roses. Their cascading habits, their fragrance, the hips that form on some of them, it's unbelievable, and they're a great complement to a water garden.